Welcome back to One Winning Pod, where we're finally going to discuss the Lamar Jackson situation that we've been somewhat avoiding because we just weren't that interested in talking about it until there was something realistically to talk about. With us, we have Alan Frankel from Coach TC's Discord, Twitter. You can find him Frank Sports 21. Alan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alec. Really good to be here. Good to meet Peter and Chris also.
Awesome. We're happy to have you too. So at 3 p.m., which was 30 minutes, they quit, guys. I think the Ravens were big quitters. They said they were going to work until 3:30, like a couple days before when Ozzie was interviewed, and they said at 3 o'clock, forget it. not exclusive tag on Lamar Jackson, making him a $32.4 million cap hit in 2023, which is about $13 million less than the anticipated by some exclusive tag. Just to set like the groundwork, probably all know the situation, but teams are now open to negotiate with Lamar once a tampering period starts on 13th. And if he signs an offer sheet, the Ravens can then match it within 5 days. If they elect not to, they'll receive 2 first-round picks. If it's before the draft this year, it'll be 2023 and 2024. If it's after, it'll be 24 and 25 for the draft picks. This is important because some teams like Miami currently do not have the draft picks to engage in such a conversation, but would after the draft. So yeah, I guess like we'll start off with initial reactions.
I mean, the initial reaction, of course, is disappointment that a deal didn't get done before this deadline. At the same time, I think we were all kind of expecting it with what the reports were that were being leaked. Again, the front office has been keeping everything incredibly tight to the vest, so it was hard to really know how much to take the reports for what they're worth. But at the same time, like we could all see that the contract was dragging on and nothing was getting done. So not a shock. A little bit of a shock about which tag was used, but after thinking about it with a little bit, and I think a lot of people have come to the same conclusion, it makes sense what they're doing, and we're just going to have to see what Lamar thinks of it.
Yeah, I think from my side, it's really interesting. I feel like this year it's more apparent that there are actually 2 different types of franchise tags. I feel like in the past, at least from what I remember, there was less of a need to kind of distinguish between the exclusive and non-exclusive tags. And to be honest, when I first kind of like heard of it, I thought like, well, normally I figured like, well, the exclusive tag would be the one that you would apply to all your players because the Ravens ended up signing almost all of them, right? I mean, you go back to guys who had, big contract disputes like Terrell Suggs or Haloti Ngata, ones that were kind of like extended out. They almost always signed them to a long-term deal by the time like training camp came back around. So it was like, I was a little surprised when it was like, oh, the non-exclusive, that means Lamar can talk to other people, but it's actually basically the same tag that's been used before. It's just that, it kind of hadn't got to that point to be able to negotiate with other teams. It wasn't really a possibility, or it wasn't really kind of a storyline with this. Whereas with the Lamar, contract, it definitely has. And, yeah, I mean, my initial thing, look, I think I've said all time along, like, I think I was pretty confident that Lamar was going to play under the franchise tag, regardless of whether a long-term deal was signed. Like, I don't think this really changes that. I think for the franchise, yeah, it's a little ballsy, but also, like, if they're, operating in good faith, as they probably are, then, it gives an opportunity for Lamar to, like, fairly, like, hey, go figure out your value. So, I think in the end, like, I hope it's fair for both sides, but, yeah, certainly there's a lot. It is certainly stressful of just like having to wait to be able to hear for more news, because there's so many people on so many different sides of this. And like, Lamar needs to get all this money. The franchise is like garbage. Like, what are they doing? Woo, it's exhausting. It's a roller coaster. Alan, what do you think?
I thought it was really smart. I thought it put a lot of other teams under the gun. I think it put Lamar's opinion of what other teams really think of him under the gun, where maybe he's having conversations with the Ravens, who are in a position where they have to say, we love you, but here's the quantifiable amount that we love. And Lamar's saying, well, I think that there's somebody who maybe unquantifiable loves me and wants me on their team. And, I'm kind of paraphrasing Skip Bayless in the way he spoke about it on the Skip and Shannon show, where he's like, you can't be a little bit private. You either are private or not. And I think that this gives the Ravens an opportunity to show Lamar, like, look, nobody feels this way about you, where everybody's going to unconditionally want you. Now, I understand that 2 first-round picks are definitely an obstacle. They're definitely an additional cost that another team has, but we've seen teams pay that kind of cost if you feel like the player is of a certain caliber. We've seen it in the NBA. We've seen it in the NFL. We've seen it pretty much across, soccer. You see it across sports leagues. If there's a guy you think is a transcendent player, then you're going to be willing to pay a substantial price to get him if you think he's one of those guys. So I think it really put Lamar in a situation where it's like, hey, get realistic a little bit. Let's see if other teams are going to show you that they don't unquantifiably love you either. And it also saved the Ravens a lot of money. So they got a dual benefit there of saving money as well as, getting rid of the elephant in the room of that there's somebody out there who thinks the world of. Now, I understand, once again, 2 first-round picks. It's another obstacle. It's a hurdle for teams, but it's not one we haven't seen teams jump through before.
I think I said it on Ken's show when he asked me to join in, but the thing that bummed me out about this whole thing is I heard the conversations about the exclusive tag and the non-exclusive tag. And I was like, it's too high of risk. I was worried about poison pills, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. But then once it actually happened and they did non-exclusive, I was like, okay, the Ravens have done their homework. Let's go look at all the actual franchises that might be interested, their cap situations, etc. And I was like, not only is it less money, which is why everyone does it for non-quarterbacks or non-crazy players, but it's just it was so obvious in retrospect because I think he's going to get a contract if someone actually does pursue him and gives him an offer sheet. I do not think it's going to be crazy from a dollars against cap perspective. I think it's going to be maybe interesting from a fully guaranteed perspective. And then it's really just a question of okay, Ravens, are you willing just to match it and keep your guy at that price that you probably knew he won it all along and something you lost your bet? Or are you going to say, you know what, those 2 picks look okay? I think for some teams, it's a very scary 2 picks. I think if you get the 6th overall pick, I think it is from the Lions, I wouldn't be shocked if the next one's 32. If they got Lamar. They're not, I'm not saying they're the favorite. I'm just saying I wouldn't be shocked because I think they're a well-built team at this point, and they might be a quarterback away from really being interesting. Plus, they have other picks. But yeah, I think they looked at the landscape and they said, okay, he's either some team's going to do the work for us and we'll just get to sign the contract, which is, I think, also why a lot of teams are allegedly out is that they don't want to do said homework. Or, they'll get 2 firsts.
There's a lot there you said that I agree with, but I do have to interject that I don't think that Detroit is a Lamar Jackson away from a Super Bowl, but that's fine. That's not the topic of this. Just kind of sandwiched that in there. But I do agree with what you said with it looks that the Ravens did their homework, because we talked about that in the group chat when it happened. We were just if the Ravens had to give up 2 firsts, if the Ravens only got 2 firsts as compensation for Lamar, Lamar's worth more than that. I think anyone outside the Ravens organization would say that too. And, if we know that, the front office knows that. So that looks to me like the Ravens front office feels really good that they won't be in that situation where they're only left with 2 first-round picks when this is all said and done. And the other thing that it really helps them with is, as others have commented on, some of this has gotten ugly. We've seen some quotes come. We've seen, Stephen A. Smith leak things that is supposedly from Lamar's camp. Who knows if it actually is or not. But this puts it out on the table. And now we'll know publicly, hey, what is it that other teams are offering this guy? What is it the Ravens are offering? And it'll all be out there. So whatever happens, we'll know. We won't have to guess as to what was offered and what was turned down. We'll know at the end of the day. But yeah, I agree that it is a roll of the dice. I think it's one that the Ravens feel is heavily weighted in their favor. But there is an opportunity for this to go south, for a team to come in, and I guess we'll talk about that later. But I do say that it does on the outset look like the Ravens are saying, we're in a good position here. We think that we have the best offer that you're going to get, and this is how we're going to prove it to you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe this might be a good time to kind of like go into, some of the landscape a little bit and kind of the other teams. I mean, I'll throw out this. I think, if everything is to believed, I do believe Lamar really likes to win. I believe he's a competitor. I believe he would want to go on a team that is going to win a lot of football games. And so the confluence of like teams, or at least situations, which Lamar would probably prefer, and the teams that have money, I think that confluence is very small, right? I mean, I don't know. Like, I feel like you can both want to play for a winner and also want to have your money. Like, I think both of those could be true. But one of them, that like Lamar has to decide like which one he wants more, right? Does he really want to play for a team like the Ravens, a proven winner, or does he want like the most money possible? And that's where I think really this is, I mean, it's frankly, it's really interesting, right? Because nobody really knows like how much he feels in these situations. Nobody's saying anything, but yeah, I mean, there, a lot of teams, I think people have kind of put on the table, obviously, pick any team basically drafting in like the top 8 this year, right? Almost any of them would probably want another quarterback. So you've got the Bears, you have the Colts, you have teams like the Falcons, the Panthers, you have like the Raiders, you have Miami, New England, I think, has been mentioned as well. Detroit, I guess, was an option, I think, but it'd be an interesting situation. I will say, like, my worst timeline is that Bill Belichick somehow decides, like, F it, I'm going to, like, change everything that I've ever done and then just, like, put everything on the table for this guy and get him. Because I think that would be a really interesting situation. It's a similar offense to what the Ravens run today. And, I mean, he's the most proven winner out there in the NFL is Bill Belichick. So, for me, like, that's a little scary, but also kind of, like, knowing, like, Bill Belichick is also the GM, like, I don't know if he's going to do that, but I mean, like, that's a really scary thought because, I mean, they have a decent amount of cap room, I think.
Allegedly, they have $31 million. They have so many weird contracts. They're paying like obscene amount of money to Hunter Henry and
Johnny Smith.
And Jonnu, yeah. They're such a weird franchise.
People think we're crazy about tight ends. Look at that. Look at those salaries. We get all like tight end, this, tight end that. Just be a what we're paying.
Yeah. They're making $32 million between the two of them. They're the second and third highest paid people on the team.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody's done more for Lamar's value other than Deshaun Watson. Only Bill Belichick can talk up his value any higher than it needs to be. He's been always very openly complimentary about Lamar, probably because he's pretty much shattered him every time he's played them. But in terms of kind of turning this back to like the organizational conversation, I think this is a really interesting way of viewing the Ravens from not from just a fan perspective, but from how does an organization run and which way do you want to run it. The Ravens are saying, we have our price, we're sticking to our guns, we've built a good roster. Our team is going to be good independent of whether Lamar's here or whether we get the compensation for Lamar that would be getting and then the cap space we would have if Lamar were to leave. So that would open up a lot of cap space for moves. It would open up probably compensation, either whether in the form of a trade or in the 2 first-round picks, which could then also be flipped at any given point. Teams, I'm sure, same way teams don't want to give up those 2 first-round picks, same way they would love to receive 2 first-round picks. So I think what the Ravens are saying is, in kind of the opposite stance of the Browns, I think it stands almost diametrically opposed. And this isn't to say that just because the Ravens are a winning franchise today that they're making the right call. The Browns have built up already since, Stefanski's been there and Andrew Berry. They've already built a talented roster. They haven't seen the wins and losses on the field, but I think that a lot of people feel like they're probably heading in a much better direction than they were, say, 10 years ago, 7 years ago. So you're seeing 2 diametrically opposed points of view from 2 diametrically opposed coaching staffs and front offices. where you have the front office in Cleveland kind of desperate for a winner and losing pretty much all their leverage, like pushing in all their chips to someone who's never played it down there, has no real connection to the city, and will already have earned a lot of money before taking a single snap or having to prove himself. They took that approach, and you see the Ravens saying, no, we have our values. We like our team. We think we could be successful with or without you. Obviously, that's also including the compensation, et cetera. And we firmly have our this is our culture. This is what we do. And we have our way of building a winner. And it's not just we're putting all of our chips in the middle of the table on one high-risk player. And I also think they're using Lamar's. Now, you can talk about Lamar. Did he hold out at the end? Did he not? We'll never. And you feel free to have your own opinion. But they're using that as leverage against him. They're saying, look, every other team is looking at you the same way, that you may or may not. Mahomes just wins a Super Bowl on a high ankle sprain that everybody knew was very painful, and you didn't do that. And Lamar's going to say, well, they took care of Patrick, this, that, the other. It's like, okay, we're going to trust you to play hurt after we pay you. Most of the time you earn that payment first. Then later on, okay, I'm trying to protect myself a little bit. Usually you have to earn it first. You show that you have that in you before you get the big money. That's how you earn it. So after you have the money, you're going to be more incentivized to play hard. So the Ravens are using, whether it was a negotiating tactic, whether you feel it was a real injury, but you're going to believe what you want to believe on that circumstance. They're using his behavior, his situation against him on the negotiating team. And I think other teams are feeling the same. They're like, am I really going to pay $200 million and 2 first-round picks for a guy that may or may not have been injured? We're not really sure. Well, how hurt was he? We just saw Mahomes do it. It doesn't look great. And I think the Ravens are, showing him, hey, you're not just going to do what you want to us and get everything you want in return. I don't know how you guys feel about the injury thing. Like, I was definitely at least skeptical of it, especially after Mike Preston article that got walked back, which was interesting, and Graven talked about it. So I think there's a little bit more smoke in terms of, everybody's being nice to each other. But I think there's a little bit more smoke than we want to believe. And that's not me trying to fan the flames or spread a rumor. That's me just reacting to the conflicting news that I'm receiving from all angles and from reputable reporters, including Skip Bayless and Mike Preston.
I think it certainly all adds up, I think what you mentioned earlier about the approach that the Ravens are taking in comparison to like what the Browns did last offseason, right? I mean, I definitely think that's valid. Of the Ravens are willing to, they're willing to build a complete roster, right? And so it's not about like, do you have the quarterback, and like it doesn't matter who you have else around it. Like quarterbacks do matter for sure, and you want to have a good quarterback, but the Ravens also feel like we have a pretty good roster, and that draft capital that we would get. And if somebody were to make an offer that we didn't want to match, like, I mean, that's the ticket to be able to get another quarterback, right? They can build a roster around that. They've proven that they've done that for the majority of their franchise history, right? Is building around quarterbacks who are not in the top 10 in the league. So I mean they're more than welcome to do that. As far as the injury, I mean, I guess my personal thing, like, I fully admit, like, it was freaking bummer. I really was really hoping that he would be able to make it back. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but I mean, I will say, like, I'm sure it adds up, of having everything on the table of like, okay, if another team comes in and they want to make an offer for him, yeah, you got to get past the draft capital. You got to get past this guy's like quote unquote, injury history, right? I mean, that's all real. Like, that is all real. Whether it was intentional, whether it has anything to do with Lamar's like behavior or anything. I mean, I don't know if I believe that as much, but I mean, in terms of like raw business value, right? In terms of the transaction, like, absolutely. Yeah. I'm sure that adds to it.
Yeah. One thing the Ravens, we know, consistently do as a franchise is, they're, I shouldn't say never, because that could get me into trouble, but overall, I think they do a good job of valuing players, and, they're not just gonna write a blank check. They're gonna be critical there of like, hey, you're an incredibly important part to this organization. Arguably one of the top 10 draft picks the Ravens have ever made. Lamar's had a great start to his career, but, let's be honest, there are some questions. I think even if you're the biggest Lamar supporter, you do have to admit that. Like we said, the injuries the past 2 seasons, the the lack of big splash games in the playoffs when we've already seen other young quarterbacks. We've said Patrick Mahomes, 2 Super Bowls already. Josh Allen hasn't made it to the Super Bowl, but he's had some big statistical games in the playoffs that are reminiscent of what he's done in the regular season. Joe Burrow has made it to the Super Bowl. Sorry, I have to bring that up. We have to say that when we're discussing this. And, some of it is on Lamar. Some of it is just circumstances that are beyond his control, or some of it's just football. You're going up against other good teams as well. And, I think the Ravens are taking all that into consideration and are trying to create a contract that's fair to where Lamar has been right now. And, of course, Lamar's going to take umbrage to that. He's going to want to try and get the most money that he's going to get. As I've been saying this whole time, it's kind of human nature if you're in that situation. And, honestly, all this might be less toxic or less drama-filled than we're making it. Because, think about it from a business perspective from Lamar, maybe just wants to see how much money he could get, And if that's the case, what the Ravens are doing is going to allow him to do that. And he might still sign with the Ravens. He might be planning to sign with the Ravens all along. He's just trying to see what's the biggest dollar amount he can get before he does that. All speculation, of course. We don't know. But, yeah, I do think that what we're saying is right. Obviously 2019, unanimous MVP, 14 wins. It was all great. But in the past 3 seasons, there's been some highs, there's been some lows. And I think all that, like we're saying, is being brought up in the contract negotiation.
Yeah, no, it's definitely all being brought up in negotiations. Not only that, let's kind of fast here a little bit. I'm looking at the play on this tag. I'm not happy about it. I expect him to hold out camp. I expect him to not be happy throughout the year. I'm also concerned that minor injuries all of a sudden, once again, could become major injuries. I just don't take out the self-interest here. And that doesn't make Lamar a bad person. I think something that I really don't like in fans, and it says this because we love the player such means a lot, that we also don't let him be a person. Like, I wouldn't hate Lamar if I had 50 million or 150 million, 200 million, and I had a sprained ankle and it could cost me that. I also would sit out. This isn't an attempt to demonize Lamar as a bad person. It's something which, this is how people do business, and this is how it is after you get to be a pro at a certain level. It's kind of removing that kid aspect of the game. Unfortunate if you want to be that kind of fan, but to me, I don't think it makes him a bad person for doing these types of things because he's not being taken care of. There's nobody telling him that he had a torn ACL that the Ravens would sign him to that same contract that they're off right now. Nobody's telling him that either. So this is, a multifaceted issue. The idea of playing on the tag, and I think this is where I kind of get a lot of you guys here. I am absolutely terrified of him playing on the tag. I think it's a total disaster. I think it gives Lamar all the in-season leverage because then if he can't play or he feels this way that we're not treating correctly, which is totally possible, he can sort of tank our season, and that's a pretty empowering thing to give a guy who is already not thrilled in the first place, and who you probably, at the very least, he could have said, all right, at least I get my 45 mil or whatever the true franchise tag is. But now I only get 32. I'm only getting that, and you're going to double hit me. You're not going to give me that long-term deal, and you're going to mess me up for this season. That's a lot. That's a lot of ammunition to give to somebody who kind of has your season by the reins. It's tough, man. So kind of going to let you guys jump in on that problem there.
I totally agree that him playing on the cap or on the tag is a total failure at this point. I don't believe it will come to that. I think a deal will be struck. And I'd argue, and maybe this is controversial, but if they can't come to a deal with him long term, I'd almost want to say, because of how the roster most likely looks and what you just described, all right, Lamar, 1-year deal. We'll pay you fully guaranteed $50 million, or like what the market rate is for you. With $18 million in next year's cap or something. Because I wouldn't want exactly what you're describing to happen. And they know better than us if there's obviously if there's anything up going on with his interest in playing. I just don't love the idea of him being underpaid this year. It
100%.
bothers me.
100%.
It just bothers me from I don't know, a fairness perspective. But at the same time, he created his own prison in a way, right? Like we know offers have been made, and we're fairly confident they were very good offers. It's just maybe not what he was looking for or what the NFLPA was looking for. So yeah, I think that's the troubling part.
So what's the difference between, I mean, beside the dollar amount, what's the difference between him playing on the franchise tag versus a 1-year deal?
I mean, I guess he got the money he was supposed to get.
I mean, either one.
I don't know.
Just for a single year, though, I think he probably wants it. I don't know.
That's fair.
I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I just, when you said that, I didn't quite get how that would be something that Lamar would agree to.
That's fair. I guess from a market value perspective, maybe you could do a 2-year deal. I don't know. 2 years fully guaranteed at that point, because you already
would have to be minimal that. Huh? I think it would have to be minimal that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, franchise tag. Okay, yeah, no, yeah.
You do a 2-year deal with void years. Same idea. So he has next year to look forward to, and then the 18s on 2025.
Yeah.
I mean, there are ways that you can massage it. But that's a good point, Peter. Maybe it has to be a 2-year deal, fully guaranteed, with a void year.
That's what makes this conversation so hard. Like we're saying, we don't know. The Ravens don't let anything out. Whenever Lamar lets anything out, it doesn't make any sense. So it's like
it's just emojis.
we're really grasping here, man.
Honestly, I don't feel like we're grasping. I think we're trying to give us the 360 degrees. We're trying to say, what could it be? What do we think? And how we feel about being in this kind of nebulous spot.
Well, if we're asking how we feel, I mean, I think everyone feels differently. I'm of the point right now where I'm at the same spot where I was when we discussed this, what was it, last pod, 2 pods ago. I'm completely like, the Ravens are going to do what they're going to do. It's all up to Lamar. The Ravens have made it clear they want him here, and if he's here, that's great. If he's not, I'm sure they can rebuild. So we'll see, man. For myself, I'm just looking at it as news, and I'm gonna adjust my emotions after I know what happens. But I do know that not everyone feels that way. I guess I'm in the minority of having a tempered opinion on all this and kind of just shutting away any emotional lean one way or the other. But that's kind of just where I've been. This has just been going on for so long.
Right. Yeah. I mean, go back to the injury point. I mean, I don't know. I don't know if the franchise tag, I don't know if him playing on it actually changes anything about the leverage. You know what I mean? Because I mean, obviously, I guess the Huntley decision of whether he's going to be here next year, I guess that's a little open. But it's sort of in that vein of 2021, Huntley came in, he did a decent job in terms of kept the offense afloat. Now, do you want 16 games of Huntley? No, absolutely not. But okay, but if Lamar gets hurt, you don't know when he's going to get hurt. Is it going to be week 1? Who knows, right? But I'm just saying, if it were 6 to 8 games or something that you had to have your backup quarterback play, that's not really tanking your season. At least not any worse than it has been the last 2 years. And it's not really a tank. That's not really what has kind of happened. Maybe 2021, you maybe argue that it was just there were a lot of losses in a row, but still,
he does play on the tag.
Yeah.
It offers a chance to see what kind of player he is. I mean, look at 2020, Dak. The Cowboys tagged him. They weren't able to get a deal done with him, and then everyone was basically piling on Dak, saying it's a terrible idea. What if he gets hurt? That's going to tank his value. He did get hurt. What was it, week 5 or 6 of that year? And then immediately afterwards, they announced his deal. They locked him up long term. Yeah, so I mean, I just can't feel like I can comment one way or the other of would Lamar sabotage the Ravens season? Would he hold out if he's on the tag? Because I don't think frankly, it just comes down to the player, and it just comes down to what decision the player wants to make. A player like Dak Prescott was off to a phenomenal start that year. He just put the team on his back and just said, that was his decision of what to do with the franchise tag. Would Lamar do that? Would Lamar be more of a Le'Veon Bell type? I just don't know if we know. It's kind of really hard to say. I feel like we're kind of spitting in the dark with that one.
Yeah, I'm highly concerned that we might be in an NBA style situation, a Ben Simmons style situation. I feel like the low ball tag situation that he's in right now is really going to be tough for him to swallow. Especially,
Wait, do we say Ben Simmons?
yeah, it might be not in a Ben Simmons from a performance standpoint, but from a I can't be here situation. We're running the risk that Lamar could say.
So that I will say,
nervous.
I don't think Lamar's definitely not Ben Simmons though. Unless he's like complete, like Ben Simmons was always a bit of a head case before that. Like he had that issue with I mean, gosh, he was suspended from LSU, wasn't he? And the 1 year that he was there, and I mean, what happened with Ben Simmons wasn't like out of the blue. It's not like he was a Boy Scout and then all of a sudden he just didn't want to be in Philadelphia. So, I mean, like I said, we don't know, but I don't think there's anything in Lamar's past that would suggest he would be a Ben Simmons type of holdout.
I think that these guys aren't those guys until one day they are. You know, we thought Kevin Durant in Oklahoma City, he was happy there. All of a sudden he wants out. These things kind of, in terms, I think I'm kind of playing into what you're saying a little bit actually before, Peter, in that we don't know what it is until it happens, but until it happens, it can be a wider range of things. And I tend to put these kind of wider things into that scope where he probably feels underpaid, he's probably upset, and he feels like the 2 first-round picks that we've attached as an albatross onto any deal, he's like, we're kind of blocking player movement. This kind of goes into CBA stuff. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. That's also in play there. I've actually came up with a fun theory called the Jax tax, where everybody who gets a fully guaranteed deal after Lamar does his thing would actually have to pay Lamar Jackson, let's say $100,000 per tax called the Jax tax. So I think that's pretty cool. But these are the types of things that are in play. These are the types of things that are in play when you're dealing with decisions that affect hundreds of millions of dollars in future contracts, hundreds of $1 million future free agent environments. And I think that not looking at that broadly and saying that we are at the nexus of what could be an inflection point for the CBA. I think Lamar feels like he's also getting hit hard by the rookie scale and the franchise tag. That whole dynamic is now getting put into play. And it's a broader issue. And I really think it's cool. Now, we don't have to go deeply into this because I know that everybody listening wants to talk about CBA and these type of things, and it's a little bit too outside the window. But I think that the fact that we as a team are kind of at the nexus here of this situation, with so many interesting parties, it's probably been the most fun off season for me because of the way I kind of try to handle these things where I take in all the information. I'll be like, okay, what are all those 360 degrees? And it turns out that it's actually quite far reaching. And you get to see the differences in organizations. Like I said before, how do players, how are they before they get their money, after they get their money, how do they behave? Will Lamar hold out in the training camp? Will he do things to potentially torpedo our season or request a trade? These things are all in play right now. And I think if he had the exclusive franchise tag, at least he'd be like, okay, they gave me the respect. I got the extra bill. They gave me some respect. This was a little bit like, if you're Lamar, this is a gut punch. So it's not just the money. It's the, it's the we think we know better than you do what you are. It can definitely be taken that way. And I know that Lamar's PR team, I think, has done an excellent job. I think it's in the Ravens' best interest to only say good things about Lamar Jackson, which is something that we all need to kind of take back and say, hey, they're not telling us this stuff because the Ravens don't want to hurt his trade value either, even if some of this stuff is true, if the effort maybe wasn't there like Skip does. If other things were happening that maybe were more within Lamar's control, like coming back from injury, those things, like, they wouldn't talk about it because it's going to hurt their interest. And so that's kind of my 360 view of what's going on. And I think it's just so cool. To be honest, I know that some people are suffering here every day. What's going to be with Lamar? I am not. I believe in our front office. I think we're going to be good. Just like you said, Peter, I think we're going to be good no matter what. And I'm really curious how it's going to shake out. And I don't think that the conversation ends before the draft, after the draft. This is an ongoing throughout the season conversation.
And before we go further, I want to apologize to Ben Simmons, although he's been involved in some stuff. He was not suspended from LSU. He was suspended 1 game or just benched 1 game for academic misconduct. But the point still stands. Whatever. I don't think Lamar is Ben Simmons. But again, like we said, we don't really know. But moving on. Ben Simmons isn't even listening to this anyway, so it doesn't matter.
I'm gonna address these things in like reverse order, I think, from how they've been discussed. So I definitely think that this is extremely interesting, Alan. And if I take the emotional part out of it, I do think you're right. And I love the Jax tax. It's hilarious. I should definitely pen that. Because you're right. Like if he gets a fully guaranteed deal, it's going to be extremely interesting from these organizations that claim they don't have any way to make that kind of money, put it in escrow and all that kind of stuff. I mean, they'll have to take loans. Like, there's going to be a lot of trouble. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out. I will say, like we talked about it with Ken, the CBA as it exists right now sort of like creates this problem as you're describing, in that no one wants to get the fully guaranteed deal because of the ramifications of A, like the escrow bit, and B, the way that can impact your cap if like disaster strikes. And then they don't want to give up the picks. No one wants to give up free labor or cheap labor, relative to their value. Because whenever you're signing players, you're trying to extract value. You're not trying just to like steady state with the signing. You're always trying to extract value. Even the top paid quarterbacks, you're hoping they extract value because they're top guys and that they're actually playing a little bit better. So when you're paying top dollar for a quarterback where extracting value is difficult, not impossible, just difficult, and then kneecapping yourselves because you don't have the draft picks, high-end draft picks, to get cheap labor all those years that you have this huge deal, it's a real tough ask. It's just a real tough ask. And I think that's why teams are out. I don't think they're out on Lamar Jackson if he was a free agent. They're out because of the 2 extra picks in addition to. The only team that can take him on right now in this current situation and feel like extremely confident is the Ravens. And it makes it tough. I don't know if you're right or not, if he's upset about it by getting the lower number tag. At first, I thought that might be the case, and like he could be prideful about it and like have a bad rap with the Ravens. But I think Chris said like maybe he wants this. He wants the opportunity to figure out if his value is actually where it is, because maybe he's like okay taking the Ravens' best offer if he can't get any more out of it. He might actually be okay. We just don't know where he is. And then lastly, emotionally, right? We were talking about how we're feeling. I think going all the way back, the original question is like how we're feeling. I mean, I was a little bit of a mess going into the deadline. I thought a deal was going to get done. I had led on false hope that a deal would get done. And the disappointment is that I feel like there's unfinished business. And we've talked about it before, 2019 scarred a lot of people. And, he said he was going to get us the Super Bowl. I still think he can do that. I think we're set up for it. And like, I can't see him go right now. Like, we got to make it work. We got to get that Super Bowl. And I think Lamar Jackson wants to play. I think if it comes down to it, I'd be surprised. But if it comes down to it and he has to play on the tag, I do not think a quarterback, like, I don't think he can hold out. I just think that's like a wild turn of events. And that is like no Lamar of mine, so to speak. Like, I just feel like that's not the Lamar we drafted. That's not the guy who says that you're going to get a Super Bowl, who's like the way he's always treated his teammates and talked about the game. If that were to happen, like he has snapped into a new Lamar, in my opinion.
We brought up that teams are saying that they're out, and we discussed why. But, part of me still wonders, though, is any of that a smokescreen? Can we really believe that these teams that are saying they're out are? I mean, like we said, we understand why it would make sense, but still, some of these teams, like, they could really use a quarterback of Lamar's. I mean, like Atlanta Falcons, the Vegas Raiders, New England. I don't think anyone believes in Mac Jones. Like, do we really believe that no one is going to try and offer Lamar a contract, or is it really just Lamar's just going to have to, just come back to the front office, tail between his, legs, for lack of a better term, and just go back to the negotiation table? I mean, what are we going to see here? What, or maybe a better question, what do we think could happen that could turn this bet that the Ravens think they have in their favor south?
I mean, yeah, like you'd have to have a team that thinks that they're really close and they want to go like the Rams method of picks for proven players, right? And yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like a lot of these teams just, they're not there. Like, I mean, the Falcons, I don't think are there. I think the Raiders are definitely not there. Like teams like the Panthers, Colts, like Houston, like I mean, Panthers maybe, but maybe a little bit closer. But like some of these other teams, they need so many pieces that it just doesn't make sense for them. Like to Alex's point, right? Use the picks to be able to get players on the deals and be able to like build out your roster, right? Now, like maybe, like I guess that's kind of why I brought up New England earlier. Like maybe New England, they might be a little bit closer, right? If you think that Mac's just not the guy, Zappy seemed to play pretty well in the offense for a couple of games, right? Like that roster is decently well-rounded, right? The Jets, another roster of like, I mean, they legitimately thought that like Zach Wilson, their second overall pick, was enough trash that they needed to go to, Flacco and Mike White at the end of the season because that was their best shot as like a whole team, right? I mean, the Jets maybe, but then they have to be willing to give that up, which is really interesting because the Jets GM is from the Ravens, so I'm just not sure if he's ready to play that ball. Just from the wrong GM tree, I think. But yeah, like you'd have to have a team like that, and I don't know. They're just like there are definitely some teams that do it, but I feel like I don't know. I mean, this is kind of a bigger conversation, but I guess like the Rams did it. It took them a really long time, but they did do it. But now we've seen after that, like their roster's completely blown up. I mean, it's gone. So I mean, like I guess the Saints are maybe kind of in that category too, but they haven't won anything since 2011, and now
they
you
got
have
Derek
teams
Carr
like
now.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, now they have Derek Carr. So, but I mean, but my point is like for some other teams, like you have the Bengals, you have like the Chiefs, you have the Eagles, and everything. Like they built up their teams through drafting, roster building, right? I don't know. Yeah, I feel like if a team wanted to take a chance at Lamar right now with the exclusive tag to give up those picks, like you have to be like really desperate with a really good roster right now to be able to do that. So yeah, I mean like maybe that's kind of to your point earlier, Alan, of like Lamar maybe being a little bit frustrated. Like I guess I could see it because I guess he is getting his market value, but also no, because those picks are so prohibitive, it's really not like a fair valuation for what teams are willing to give up. It's more of like, yeah, I mean, it's a little bit of a sham in that perspective, right? It's not equivalent to the same as like he's a free agent. Like everybody give their best offers. It's the best offer plus those picks, and that's a huge deal for sure.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's a tough situation for Lamar Jackson right now. You feel like you should be one of the highest paid players, and now you're sitting below, below the exclusive franchise tag on a 1-year deal where you're risking injury again as a player who's frequently injured. You're risking that major injury again. It's not a fun position to be him. Like that's what I'm saying before. I'm not upset with Lamar Jackson the person for doing these types of things. It wouldn't be fun to be him right now as much as I'd love to have $34 million. So I guess to some extent, but his objectives, it looks like were to be one of the highest paid players in the history of the game. His objective, at least in the contract situation, was to get that. And that's not going to happen. And it's not going to happen next year either because I don't know exactly how it works with the repeater franchise tag. But he's staring down a barrel here, going back to play for a team that kind of used all their leverage against him. It's a tough ask. It's really a tough ask. And in terms of like the partners, even if somebody wanted to sign him to a big deal, the Baltimore Ravens just say, okay, we'll sign you. And now, hey, we want extra compensation alongside that. So yes, the team could poison pill, but that's going to be really risky because it's going to financially be cost prohibitive. Remember, he has to sign, and they have to take him, and it has to be. They're not going to be able to sign it with like a small offer sheet. It's going to have to be a big trade, a big offer. So the Ravens could just match that and say, okay, you can have Lamar, but you got to give us Lamar plus. Maybe it isn't 2 first-round picks, but it's a first and this player. I've outlined trades for, let's say, Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown, or Ramsey and Stafford, kind of trades that will be fill that quarterback with a veteran and a position of need somewhere else. Those aren't specific trades. I don't know like all the cap gymnastics. I'm just telling you the framework of the type of trade that I think the Ravens might be inclined to accept. So kind of shifting that gear of like, okay, let's say somebody did give the offer sheet. The Ravens could absolutely match it and then just say, you can have them plus give us assets A, B, and C.
Right. Yeah, the match and trade is totally a viable thing. So like in a way they could get more picks, but I don't know. It's just it's a weird and unfortunate situation. I think you're right though. Like I think unfortunately Lamar is at this horrible spot where first of all we have this fully guaranteed deal out of desperation that shouldn't have happened for a trash player. My opinion. And then
you're entitled to your opinion.
And then you have all these failed trades. You have the Russell Wilson trade that looks horrible. Trade everything for this guy. It's not working out. The quarterback market is simmering down, in my opinion. Like we in a market that felt like it could not get any lose any momentum as far as value. I think it's people are gun shy after seeing what happened to Denver to do a trade like that. And I mean, and to be fair, we have to include Cleveland. They didn't see the best performance out of Watson. They have no first round picks and they gave him a crazy contract. So you see these two trades happen. I think it's somewhat torpedoed his trade value from the Ravens perspective. And believe it or not, right? I don't personally think it's true, but a lot of people in the NFL think that you have to perfectly construct an offense for Lamar Jackson to succeed. And you need to have the certain personnel that he's good with. And while there are things that benefit any player and Lamar is a unique player, so those benefits could be unique, I do not think that's actually true, right? I think he could succeed with the weapons on hand, particularly with some of these teams that have some really exceptional wide receivers. That's why I think the lines are so interesting. I think they have really good wide receivers. They have good running backs. The lines are right. They're going somewhere.
Stop selling Lamar to the Lions.
I'm not trying to do it. I'm just saying
did I mention it's a dome team in the NFC where a lot more of the competitors are on artificial turf? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't need to keep doing this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's
all
true.
all my trades are always Lamar to an NFC dome team, so he doesn't have to play in the rain or the snow. That's been a big thing for me. Where Lamar, that's been one of the sticky points. But I want to kind of jump on Alex's point a little bit. So Stephen A. Smith, who I actually always enjoyed listening to, he's it's disrespectful for the Ravens to not give him a deal when Russell Wilson, John Watson, and Kyler Murray have these deals, and I'm like. Disrespectful or intelligent? You just listed 3 potentially worst contracts, and you're saying my team isn't doing that? Really? That's a bad idea? I'm like, Stephen A., you got to read somebody editing your Twitter because this doesn't sound really smart at the current juncture.
Dude, the more I already Arizona in particular, man, I just already did not have a very high opinion of them as a franchise, but oh my god, especially out of a lot of the news this offseason with their equipment program and everything, oh my goodness, so bad. Trash franchise. But yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. Yeah, you guys bring up great points. It's I think for, kind of going back to the point of is Lamar going to be disrespected here? I think honestly, the key, and unfortunately, we're not going to know about this until after it happens, right? Is that relationship with Eric DeCosta, because he doesn't have an agent, right? I can't imagine being in DeCosta's shoes because you have to be extremely careful not to do anything to upset that balance, right? I mean, if things are if the team is to believe, right, that everything hey, we're operating in good faith, we're letting Lamar kind of get his options from the market, right? If all that is to be believed, right? I mean, you've got to be really careful to be able to not sour that relationship. I think there is a way to be able to do that correctly and not piss off Lamar and have him come back. That is still an option, but I mean, it's walking a tightrope. I mean, it really is. Right? It is a lot of it's business acumen. It's personality. It's the ability to be able to make those negotiations. It's personal and business, right? It's certainly hard. I mean, I just, like I said, I can't imagine being in DeCosta's shoes and trying to do that because one small little slip up or one insertion of doubt or something that that can stick with a person, right? And now you've influenced the whole thing.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a really tricky situation. And you're right. Like, I can't imagine being DaCosta negotiating directly with Lamar. It's a unique problem. And I mean, I'm sure he doesn't have anything that disrespectful to say. It's just, you know, we can't do that, like whatever it is that is the sticking point. It seems like they haven't been able to get past it. I think this is a good point to get to final thoughts on the Lamar situation before we talk about like what is now the aftermath of at least the initial tag decision and what it means from a cap and player move perspective.
I mean, I guess I can go first. My final thoughts are that Lamar Jackson is going to be starting for the Ravens week 1 of this season. I think the Ravens will get a deal done.
Babe.
Because it's just part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still hopeful he will be here. Whether they get a deal signed this season, I'm not totally sure, but I think he will be a Raven this season. I still feel pretty good about that.
I'm absolutely terrified. I don't like the idea of having a player in this situation for a number of reasons. Definitely don't like a player who is always dinged up, and who's playing styles like that in this situation. It's not like, you have a Peyton Manning where if he doesn't get hit the whole game or something like that, you're like, okay, he's not going to not play next week because just he didn't get hit. Got injured, reading the playbook, got eye popped, writing some notes, he hurt his finger. But when you have a guy like Lamar in this situation, I just want to see how he sounds in these interviews coming into the season. I want to see the expression on his face. I want to see how it looks if he comes to camp. I'm terrified that we're going to be dealing with a holdout situation. I'm terrified that we're setting ourselves up. It's kind of unintended consequences. I think it was the right decision to give him the non-exclusive tag, but I also think that there's a major downside to it. So the way I'm feeling right now would be uneasy with the side of uneasiness. Just that's how I feel, and I'm very curious how it plays out during the draft. I think we could have some major news during the draft. I think that it adds a lot of drama. If you're a TV network news anchor, this is like an episode of this is like an episode of The Bachelor. That's what I've told my friend. I have a friend who's a big fan of The Bachelor. So I'm like, this is like an episode of The Bachelor. Like, who's he going to choose? Is he going to choose the bunny? Is he going to choose this? Like, I feel like we're in the middle of a reality TV show in a lot of senses. And I don't know how much reality TV you guys watch. It doesn't always end well.
Yeah. Well, we're over the cap as of this recording. And the way that the Ravens are trying to fix this is they did end up dealing Chuck Clark for a 2024 seventh round pick, which is basically as little compensation as you could possibly get. I mean, the 2025 seventh round pick would have been worse, I guess, but it's pretty bad. But I mean, they actually did save more money by trading him because some of his contract was guaranteed. And I also think that his contract was favorable. I think he could have maybe gotten a little bit more on the open market, providing the green dot and the leadership and the quality of play that he does. So the Jets picked him up for a really low value. I think they're giving themselves a hell of a player. But at the same time, I'm not terribly torn up about this. Chuck Clark was definitely a favorite of the pod. We had a lot of fond memories about him. But I think obviously with Hamilton stepping in and Stone, the way he's played, I think we'll be all right.
Third safety to go to the Jets. Jim Leonard, Ed Reed. Am I missing one, guys? I think that's it.
I am sure that there was another. I shouldn't say I'm sure, but I wouldn't be shocked if there was another because the Jets, just like the Browns back in, the 2004 to 2010, have really liked grabbing up Ravens players. But yeah, at least those guys. But yeah, I mean, I think Alex said all the correct things about this. Chuck Clark, I've said many times, one of my favorite players on the Ravens the past few seasons. Had to share the gif of him jumping over Phillip Rivers one last time in the chat. I'm sure it won't be the last time, though. That gif will live on. It's my favorite. But yeah, I mean, it's just the same as just, Hayden Hurst, Orlando Brown getting traded when they did. Just the Ravens had a glut at that position. Between Stone and Hamilton, you've got basically everything that Clark could do. Of course, it's great to all have that all in one player, but Hamilton could develop into that But yeah, I mean, the Ravens, they have direct replacement, so you trade them. It's disheartening that the return was as little as it was, but of course, sometimes we value these players on the Ravens more so than the rest of the league does, and the Ravens also don't have the best track record of sending defensive players who aren't edge rushers other places and them particularly thriving. So best of luck to Clark, but we'll see what he's ultimately able to do with the Jets.
DeJuan Landry, also with the Jets. Well,
there you go.
I mean, was with the Jets, not anymore, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, Echo and Clark. It's a big shame. It's actually funny when we were talking about, I think the Ravens doing a good job at evaluating players fairly. I think Clark's a great example of that on the other side. Like, not a star player, but he was a player. They brought a lot of value to this team, particularly on the defense. I mean, just, one thing to remember, too, of like, Ravens stuck with Clark over Earl Thomas. Like, they put a lot of money into Earl, but they realized that mistake pretty quickly. And ended up sticking with a guy like Chuck. So I mean, that stuff does matter, especially for some of the more, I guess, fringe players. I think on your franchise. I mean, I think that's probably fair to say with Chuck. I mean, he was a good starter. He was solid. He was not in the top half in terms of like overall like highest performing defensive players, but that doesn't mean that he was a bad player. It's just unfortunate that, the Ravens valued him pretty highly, but the rest of the market did not seem to. I agree, a 7th round pick for that. Like, I mean, that reminds me kind of the Bozeman contract of last year of like, we thought Bozeman was going to get a ton of money and he ended up getting like a 1-year deal for what, $7 million, $8 million bucks or something.
I think it was 3. It was like nothing.
Was it 3?
Really
yeah. It was something. Yeah. It's just, yeah. I mean, it sucks personally for him just because great guy, great stand-up guy, but I don't know, if anything, it makes me happy for the Ravens just to know that they took care of their own, but sometimes it's time to go.
All right, well, that basically wraps up the show. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks you, Alan, for joining in. I thought there was a lot of really interesting perspectives you brought.
Thanks. I had an awesome time with you guys. Peter, Chris, really great to see this one.
We'll be back soon. We talked about Clark, and we kind of had the idea. It was Chris's idea. Maybe we'll bring it back, the 2020 pseudo-tradition of a March Madness chart. So we're going to try to put together the best, best late-round picks by the Ravens. Not cop picks, just late-round picks in a chart, and we'll have everyone vote, and we'll figure out the winner. So
just wanted to have a chart where Chuck Clark ends up in the top 5. I don't know if he's gonna win. Stay tuned, but,
this man's gonna win the chart. No, he's gonna be like he's gonna be the 1 seed, the number 1 side.
Dude, you got a lot of fun in editing, man. It's bracket. Come on, man. Yeah. Bracket. March Madness bracket. It's all about the brackets.
That's right. We'll have a bracket. And
well, another thing we did, I know we had everyone fill it out last time. We also didn't have as our following's gotten a little bigger since then. We could also just do it through polls on Twitter.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it.
Each round.
Also, rumor has it that the winner of this late round bracket poll will get voted to the Pro Bowl next year.
That's right. Also, rumor has it that they will be demanded to come on the show as a guest. But anyways, you can find us on Twitter at OneWinningPod, on YouTube at OneWinningPod, and you can email us onewinningpod@gmail.com. We'll see you in a few weeks.